everyone, Andrew here, and today I want to talk a little bit about something I think is rather interesting and not being covered by too many other people out there at the moment, and that is the battery life of retro video games. And I would like to clear up some misconceptions, I think, that exist around, just how long these batteries last, and maybe, start a little bit of a discussion on what people think is going to happen from here on out, and maybe exactly, what people's experiences are with batteries, dying or maybe still working today. This was brought about by the fact I was reading through the Star Tropics instruction manual, something I always keep by my bedside, some light bedtime reading or such like that. And there's a little bit of a blurb in here that goes as follows. A battery is used to retain the player's game data for 5 years. However, depending on the conditions under which the game pack is kept, such as exposure to high temperatures, etc., the life of the battery may be shortened. So I think that that's really fascinating that in this book, this is of course, right back at the beginning of keeping game saves via battery, technology, and they wouldn't have really known at the time just how long it was going to last. So I think it's funny that, 5 years is like a maximum, a ceiling that they're setting, saying at most 5 years, and then doing other things like exposing it to high temperatures will decrease it from that 5 years. And this actually goes all the way back to even the original Legend of Zelda book, where looking in here, we find pretty much that exact same blurb stating 5 years. Zelda 1 coming out in the United States and Canada in 1987, and being known as the very first home console games actually include a battery inside for holding saved data. Before this, it was all passwords and such, and the Japanese release of the original Legend of Zelda actually was on the Famicom disk system, so it used that to save writing and such, and it wasn't until the 90s when Japan actually got a cartridge version of Zelda 1. So you consider that 1987, Star Tropics comes out in the year 1990, at the end of 1990, so 5 years still hadn't passed. They still actually didn't know, I guess, just how long these batteries were going to last. But then if we look at a game like Zoda's Revenge, Star Tropics 2, and look inside the instruction manual, you will actually once again find that blurb about 5 years, although this game came out in 1994. So they would have actually been able to look back at those original Legend of Zelda 1 cartridges and, realize that maybe these batteries last longer than 5 years. I just think it's so funny that it says that, though. It suggests this 5-year, timeline for the batteries lasting. Meanwhile, all of my NES games still hold saves to this day, meaning that 32 years later, you're still getting, your save data on Zelda 1 without any kind of battery replacement. And of course for Star Tropics as well, this being, my original cartridge, one that my mom bought brand new back in the day when it came out right around, the end of 1990, early 1991, and it still holds saves perfectly fine as well. So it's really funny that, I guess these, their estimate was just completely blown out of the water. And I think that there are people out there who misunderstand and believe that retro games, maybe, they're not retro collectors themselves, maybe they don't really, have their hands on a retro collection these days. I think there's a lot of misconception that people think that all older games have dried up batteries now, that they don't save anymore. And I think that the biggest causer of that misconception is the second generation Pokemon games. You look at games like Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and none of them will save anymore. And there's a big reason for that, and it's because of the clock system that these games use. Because of that constantly updating clock, the constant usage of the battery to run that clock, the second generation Pokemon games died super quickly. The original Pokemon games coming out in the year, or not the original, rather, the second generation coming out in North America in 2000, and from what I was able to research, it was around 2007 that people started to report online that they were, it was a consistent problem with save data no longer being held on their second generation Pokemon cartridges. So they only lasted about 7 years, and I think that a lot of people, when they think, when they hear that the second generation Pokemon games aren't saving, it's a common misconception to think, well, obviously then, games made before that won't be saving as well, but you have to remember that that clock really affected things. There's another Game Boy Color game called Card Captor Sakura, Itsumo Sakura-chan to Ishoni, or Always with Sakura-chan. And this game also uses a clock for real-time events. Depending on the day of the week and the time that you play this game, different things will occur. And this game also, every single copy will no longer save with its original battery because that clock system drained it extra fast. Meanwhile, you look at games like Pokemon Blue, Pokemon Yellow, Pokemon Red, those first generation Pokemon games, and they still save. At least in my case, I have my original Pokemon Blue and my original Pokemon Yellow, which to this day still has a Mew that I received from the official event at Toys R Us on it, and it still saves perfectly fine without any kind of battery replacement. So I just really wanted to, mention that. And I guess the other thing to note as well, then you go to the third generations of Pokemon games, you get into Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, and while your saves will not be deleted when the battery inside runs out, you probably, if you own the third generation Pokemon game, get that message when you turn it on telling you that the battery has run dry and that clock-based events will no longer happen, and which is not really that big of a deal in the third generation of Pokemon games, as it's not even like it had a day and night system. It was pretty much just for, growing berries and such. But because instead of your saves being held, via battery, getting tongue-tied here, lots of different games, lots of different things being talked about, it's saved to the actual chip itself. The battery running dry will not erase your third-gen Pokemon games. It will just stop those clock-based events from occurring. But I believe that it is all thanks to the scare caused by these second-generation Pokemon games, and the fact that they don't save anymore. That there's this misconception that a lot of retro games don't save anymore, which isn't true. I have not come across actually a single game in my retro collecting career of over 10 years now that never saved. Like, sometimes you'll turn a game on and the save data just won't be there. Like, all the files will be blank. But if I play it, I save, I reset, or turn the power all the way off, turn it back on, the save will still be held. Come back a week later, the save will still be held. So I don't think that if the data accidentally gets wiped like that, that's a battery problem. I used to have that all the time. People will know I've talked about like the Donkey Kong Country games, especially as a kid. I would always put them in, and sometimes files would be missing and such. And I recently mentioned in another video I had that problem with Crystalis on the NES back in the day, and I think that's mostly a problem when you don't keep your consoles clean, which was something I had no idea about doing back as a kid, and that can cause glitches or such to happen, which causes files to get wiped. I'm not exactly entirely sure around the science between when you turn a game on and your data's gone, but it's not a battery problem. I remember one time as a kid, I put Paper Mario in, and this is a while after I had played it, so all 4 files were filled. I turned it on, and all 4 files were empty, so I was like, oh crap. So I turned the game off, took the cartridge out, blew in it, which is that thing you're never supposed to do, put it back in, and suddenly all the files were back. So I don't know what the science behind that is, but that doesn't seem like a battery problem. That seems like more the console was probably dirty and something wasn't making a good connection problem. But yeah, I think it's really interesting that despite the fact in the instruction books, it's actually stated that it's expected only like a 5-year life out of these saves. Zelda, the original game that saved, and of course Star Tropics and all my NES games still save to this day. With and the only thing I have had problems with are those games like Pokemon Gold, Silver, Crystal, Cardcaptor Sakura, anything that has a clock system that battery it gets drained from. That's going to be the thing. So I think it's interesting, again, to note that maybe if you have, your Pokemon batteries changed because you can't, save on the second generation Pokemon games anymore. Based on what I found online, it looks like you probably have about 7 years from the date that you changed it before it runs out again. Of course, depending on the quality of the batteries as well. You can buy replacement batteries. There's probably different varying qualities of the ones that you can buy. That's the thing about batteries. Like, batteries used to be such more, what's it called? Disposable batteries. We use so much rechargeable batteries now, but disposable batteries used to be such a huge staple of video games between, them actually being inside them to save, but also for your handheld consoles. Game Boys used them and all that sorts of stuff like that. And I always felt like the cheap dollar store batteries never lasted, never powered my Game Boy Color as long from the name brands. I don't know if that's just like corporate brainwashing, and it's like, of course, if I had Energizer, it would have lasted, another couple hours or something like that. And it was just me thinking because I was using the dollar store brand that they were dying quicker, or maybe it is a brand thing. Again, I'm not, the biggest battery expert, but depending on, if you buy that cheap dollar store battery to put into your Pokemon Silver, or if, go to maybe a more reputable source, that maybe that will change, how long these last, but I'd say you probably have about a 7-year, maximum-ish. based on, you know, what we saw when it was originally released, if you get those batteries changed. So the question this raises then is, you know, just how much longer do games have like Zelda and Star Tropics if, you know, they haven't died yet? And I remember this is something that's been on my mind for a long time because, you know, not necessarily understanding that maybe these were all dying as the clock back in the day. I was like, well, you know, obviously I'm going to start losing my, you know, childhood saves from Star Tropics, and, you know, I won't be able to play Zelda anymore because, you know, it won't save, and then you'll have to play the whole thing in one sitting and such unless you get it changed. I think it's going to be really interesting to see just when that starts to happen, and Zelda will be the one that tells the tale, again, being the very first home console game to have that battery in it, assuming that, again, you know, maybe the quality of the battery used in Star Tropics wasn't as good as the one used in Zelda, so maybe we can't use that as a benchmark, but assuming that all of them were the same quality, you know, I guess there'll just suddenly be a massive wave of everyone will wake up one day and, like, the first production run of Zelda 1, you know, all of them will be wiped or something like that, and then, you know, what will happen next is, you know, like Dragon Warriors released in 1989 will be wiped, and starting Zelda 2s, and then Star Tropics', and then Mario Worlds on Super Nintendo, and then Star Tropics 2s, and it'll just get this kind of like, you know, gradual wiping out of all the different saves on different games. I think it'll be interesting to see just exactly how that happens, and, you know, what happens when that point comes. You know, because I can't imagine a lot of people are going to want to buy, you know, hundreds of batteries to change their games and stuff. I know that there's some game stores out there already who, like, every game that they receive, they will change the battery inside it, but that's just not, you know, reasonable for the average person, I believe. So it'll be interesting to see just what happens as time goes on, and then what will happen to games which batteries aren't changed. I guess if, you know, anything, this would start happening in the second generation Pokemon games sooner than anything, but one thing that happens with batteries when they hit that point of, you know, being run out but also still being used is that sometimes they start to leak. I mean, this is of course more common with things like AA's and AAA's and such. I remember back in, you know, thrifting days before it was dead, I found a Super Scope at a thrift store. I opened it up because that thing has 6 AA batteries in it. It was just massacred. Like, it was just Acid City, you know, exploded everywhere. So, I don't know if that's going to start to happen with watch batteries. I mean, you don't see explosions like that happening as commonly with watch batteries, or, you know, the ones, the type that are used inside of the, you know, games and such, but I wonder if that will start happening. Maybe it's like, you know, a Y2K of games with save batteries in them, you know, Doomsday coming up, where suddenly any of them that aren't changed are going to explode, ruin the boards, and they won't be playable. I don't know. It's just something to kind of consider, because I don't think that many people are really thinking that far ahead, or maybe I'm just, you know, exaggerating and such. I just think it's something interesting to consider, because like I said, always since back in the day, you know, Star Tropics being such an important game to me, I've always wondered, you know, like, when will the day come that suddenly all those saved, you know, save files will be gone? And I think that we'll need to, you know, watch Zelda 1, as it will probably tell the tale of just when games that do not use clocks, you know, in their games, you know, will start to wipe. I don't know. Again, this is just kind of me speaking theoretically, thinking through, you know, the different experiences I've had with games. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Have you encountered games that aren't, you know, the second generation Pokemon games, which will just not hold saves anymore? Like, sometimes what happens too is, you know, the data can get corrupted if you turn it off while it's saving and such, and that can cause problems that aren't necessarily related to the battery. So I can understand if people have games where maybe that's prevented you from saving as you normally would. But in terms of the actual battery, I'd be curious to see just how many people, you know, actually have games where maybe the battery has run dry, which aren't the second generation Pokemon ones. My games have always been kept in good condition. They've always been kept inside. I do live in Canada, so we do have, you know, the extremes of, you know, cold winters and hot summers, but, you know, they've never, like, been left outside in the snow or buried in the dirt or something like that. So I'd say that they've always been kept in pretty fair temperatures. The other thing to consider is that if you are changing your batteries inside a game, obviously, unless you somehow did it while it was still turned on, it's going to lose whatever data is in there when you replace the new battery. A couple options to consider are, I made a video about the game action replay, which you can actually use to create a save state. So say, you know, you don't want to lose your Zelda or your Star Tropics save data, create a save state with this, change the battery, and then load the save state, and then theoretically, you'd be able to get all that data back, and, you know, you could just save again and it would remember, you know, all that. I don't know. That's just kind of theoretically. And then you can also do the same thing, say, with your Pokemon games. You can make a save state using things like the Game Boy Color Game Shark. And then if you know, your battery or your data for Pokemon was wiped, you could then just load it back up again with the Game Shark, save, and it would be like nothing ever changed. Again, those aren't things that I've actually tried myself, but I've always had in the back of my mind, like if I had to do that kind of thing, maybe I should be ready with my Game Shark as long as the Game Shark's battery, doesn't die on me as well. So yes, please let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts on all this are. Like, should we, be changing batteries of games like The Legend of Zelda, 32 years now, still ticking, but maybe we should change it before it gets to that point where it dies and explodes all over the board. But then again, if even the second generation games aren't exploding yet and they've been dead, since 2007, I guess maybe that's not too much of a fear, but I'm just really curious to see just how much farther they will go, because again, I've been thinking about this in the back of my mind since, over 10 years ago now when Pokemon Silver and such started dying, and they're still going. But I wonder if 10 years from now, we'll still be able to say the same thing. So please let me know, again, in the comments what you think about all this. I guess you can't leave a video response. Those do not exist anymore. But I always like having that back and forth discussion with people on just how you think the future is going to go in regards to the almighty battery and our saves in retro games. Yes, so again, my experience is that aside from those second generation Pokemon games, all of mine are still going strong. So if you are, at the flea market, at a garage sale, at a thrift store, and you come across The Legend of Zelda, I would not fear too greatly, unless it looks like the game has been absolutely dragged through the mud or something, that you probably still will be able to save even if you do not change that battery. That would be my guess. So thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of, just talk about batteries. It's very riveting, very exciting. And who knows what the future will have in store. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed. I hope to see you next time for something different. So thanks and see you later.